At the beginning of the 20th century, the United States taxed yellow margarine at 40 times the rate of uncolored margarine, 10 cents a pound instead of 1/4 cent. Some states went further. They forced the substitute to remain white. A few tried to make it pink. The color was the battlefield because yellow-made margarine looked like butter, and dairy producers feared that appearance could steal their market. Families responded with dye capsules and color packets. They softened a white block, squeezed in yellow, and kneaded the product by hand. Margarine was not simply fake butter. It was an invention trapped between hunger, chemistry, lobbying, and law. To spread it on bread, consumers first had to decide who had the right to own the color yellow. In the 1860s, Napoleon III offered a prize for an inexpensive substitute for butter that could feed the military and people with limited incomes. The challenge reflected a real problem. Butter was desirable, but perishable, variable, and relatively expensive. Cities were growing. Armies and industrial workforces needed fats that could be produced, stored, and transported at scale. Butter supply also followed the biology of dairy herds and the availability of cold storage. Milk had many competing uses. Turning cream into butter concentrated value, but it did not make production independent of cows, feed, seasons, and land. French chemist Hippolyte Maurice developed a process using beef fat. He separated a softer fraction, blended it with milk, and produced a butter-like emulsion. He patented the invention in France in 1869 and called it oleomargarine, drawing on a mistaken chemical vocabulary of the era. The early product was not modern vegetable oil spread. It came from animal fat and a theory about how cows produced milk fat. The theory was imperfect. The commercial idea was powerful. The name itself came from 19th century chemistry. Margaric acid had been named from a Greek word for pearl because of the appearance of its crystals. Later chemistry corrected the underlying classification, but oleomargarine kept the inherited name. Take a fat cheaper than butter. Refine it. Emulsify it. Shape it into a familiar form. Cell function without requiring the original animal process. Maurice struggled to build a great fortune from the invention. Dutch entrepreneurs and manufacturers became more successful at industrializing the product and combining fats through international trade. From the beginning, margarine carried an identity problem. Was it a clever new food, an honest substitute, or a counterfeit hiding under butter's color? The answer depended on who was selling. Margarine reached the United States during a period of rapid food industrialization. Urban consumers were buying products made far from the household and could not easily inspect how they were produced. That distance created opportunity for fraud. Retailers could sell a cheaper fat as butter. Adulteration scandals gave dairy producers a powerful argument. Consumers needed protection. Butter was not automatically pure either. 19th century food markets could contain watered, colored, rancid, or adulterated products of many kinds. The conflict was not between a perfectly natural market and sudden industrial deception. It was a struggle over how government should police identity in a system where producer and eater no longer knew each other. But protection and competition became difficult to separate. Dairy organizations pushed for labels, licenses, taxes, and color restrictions. If margarine had to look white, consumers would immediately see that it was not butter. The rule prevented deception and made the substitute less appetizing. The Federal Oleomargarine Act of 1886 imposed taxes and licensing requirements. It did not end the fight. In 1902, Congress sharply increased the tax on artificially colored oleomargarine while reducing the tax on uncolored product. Manufacturers, wholesalers, and retailers faced federal occupational taxes and record requirements. Enforcement could target not only factories, but shops that sold the product. A food category became a monitored trade. The numbers reveal the strategy. 1/4 cent per pound if it stayed pale. 10 cents per pound if it looked like butter. Law was pricing a color. The Supreme Court upheld the federal tax in McRae v. United States in 1904. The court did not need to admire the policy. Congress possessed taxing power even when the burden pushed hard against one form of the product. Margarine had become a constitutional food. Some opponents wanted more than whiteness. Legislatures considered or enacted rules requiring margarine to be colored pink, red, or another unnatural shade. The logic was brutal. A label could be ignored. A pink block could not be mistaken for butter. But compulsory pink also revealed the policy's purpose. This was not simply truthful identification. It could make a lawful food repulsive. Courts struck down some of these measures, yet state restrictions remained a patchwork. Rules governed color, serving in restaurants, sale in public institutions, licenses, and signs. Enforcement created raids, fines, and smuggling stories. Cross a state line, and the same yellow block could change legal status. That patchwork rewarded evasion. Dealers relabeled goods, concealed coloring, or moved product from permissive jurisdictions into restrictive ones. Inspectors tested samples and followed paper trails. The food war therefore produced its own underworld, not because margarine was intoxicating, but because price differences made ordinary fat worth smuggling. The conflict became known as the Oleomargarine Wars. Dairy regions fought hardest because butter supported farmers, creameries, and local politics. Margarine manufacturers answered that consumers deserved a cheaper choice. Each side claimed the public interest. The consumer stood between them, holding two similar fats with very different legal identities. This battle also shaped language. Butter substitute described function. Oleomargarine sounded technical. Margarine became ordinary. Fake butter carried accusation. Names were weapons because classification determined trust. Then the industry found a way to obey the color law and let the customer finish the forbidden transformation at home. Manufacturers sold margarine as a white block with a separate packet or capsule of yellow coloring. The consumer mixed it in. Hands pressed the color through the fat until streaks disappeared. Some packages allowed the kneading to happen inside a plastic bag. The law could keep factories from selling yellow margarine, but it could not easily stop a family from coloring food in the kitchen. The transformation was tactile. At first, yellow veins marbled the white mass. Press again, fold again, and the evidence of substitution slowly vanished. The household performed the final manufacturing step that law had forbidden the factory to perform. The ritual turned regulation into participation. Children could help. Advertising presented the work as clever and economical rather than burdensome. But inconvenience was the point. Butter arrived naturally yellow or could be standardized with coloring under different rules. Margarine buyers had to perform extra labor to make their purchase look normal. The burden fell disproportionately on households with less money, the very consumers attracted to the cheaper product. Color laws therefore did more than protect information. They made class visible at the table. A pale block announced substitution. A hand-mixed yellow block tried to erase the announcement. This is why the food war lasted. Margarine threatened more than butter sales. It challenged the idea that authenticity belonged to origin rather than performance. If chemistry could reproduce spreadability, color, and cooking function, what exactly was butter selling? Shortage can change a stigma faster than advertising. During the World Wars and other periods of constrained dairy supply, margarine became more important. Governments needed fats for civilians and armed forces. Butter required milk, pasture, animals, cold handling, and time. Alternative fats could stretch supplies. Rationing changed the moral language. In abundance, a substitute could look deceptive. In shortage, refusing a workable alternative could look wasteful. Necessity made technological food patriotic. The product also changed composition. Manufacturers increasingly used vegetable oils, supported by expanding global commodity systems. Coconut, cottonseed, soybean, palm, and other oils entered different formulations across time and place. This transition linked margarine to colonial and global trade. Tropical oils traveled into European factories. Domestic oilseed industries lobbied for their own place. A product invented to imitate local dairy became a blend of commodities whose origins could span continents. Turning liquid oil into a firm spread required chemistry. Hydrogenation could increase solidity and shelf stability. Blending, emulsifiers, flavoring, salt, vitamins, and coloring helped produce the expected behavior. The laboratory did not make the product less real. All food processing changes materials. But margarine made the intervention unusually visible because it imitated a culturally powerful reference. After wartime scarcity, many consumers continued buying it for price, convenience, or changing ideas about health. Opposition weakened unevenly. Federal colored margarine taxes were eventually repealed, while state restrictions lasted longer. Wisconsin, a major dairy state, did not repeal its ban on yellow margarine until 1967. A color fight that began in the 19th century survived into the age of television. Then, health science reversed the battlefield. Butter's naturalness no longer guaranteed virtue, and margarine's modern chemistry no longer guaranteed progress. By the mid-20th century, concern about saturated fat and heart disease helped vegetable oil margarines gain a health advantage in public perception. Advertising presented the switch as scientific progress. A tub could look lighter, cleaner, and more controlled than a wrapped block of butter. Endorsements and health language replaced the old defense of mere cheapness. Butter was rich in saturated fat. Many margarines used more unsaturated vegetable oils. Packages presented the substitute as modern, controlled, and heart-conscious, but margarine never described one stable formula. Some products were hard sticks high in saturated fat. Some relied heavily on partially hydrogenated oils, which could contain industrial trans fats. Others were softer spreads with different fat profiles. As evidence on trans fat strengthened, the health halo cracked. Industrial trans fat raises harmful LDL cholesterol and lowers protective HDL cholesterol. Public health authorities linked it to cardiovascular risk. Required nutrition labeling made the invisible fat profile easier to compare, though serving size rules and zero rounding could still confuse consumers. Advocacy, lawsuits, local restrictions, and reformulation moved faster in some places than others. The old food war had asked whether margarine was real butter. The new question was whether its manufacturing process created a risk consumers could not see. Companies reformulated. Labels changed. In the United States, the Food and Drug Administration determined in 2015 that partially hydrogenated oils were no longer generally recognized as safe for use in food. Most uses were removed over the following years. Formulators could use naturally firmer fats, fully hydrogenated oils blended with liquid oils, or interesterification, which rearranges fatty acids on glycerol molecules. The technical details changed, but the commercial goal remained familiar: spread from the refrigerator, melt in the pan, and remain stable on the shelf. That decision did not make all margarine unhealthy, and it did not make butter harmless. Modern products vary. A soft spread made with unsaturated oils and no partially hydrogenated oil is nutritionally different from an older hard stick. The lesson is not butter one. The lesson is that a category can change underneath its name. Modern margarine solved dependence on dairy by creating dependence on other systems. Vegetable oils connect the tub to soybean fields, rapeseed farms, sunflower crops, and oil palm plantations. Refining, fractionation, interesterification, blending, and emulsification allow manufacturers to tune texture without relying on partially hydrogenated oils. Each feedstock carries different costs. Palm oil can provide solidity without industrial trans fat, but plantation expansion has been linked to deforestation and habitat loss when production is poorly governed. Soy and other crops require land, fertilizer, processing, and trade. Butter has its own environmental burden through cattle, methane, feed, land, manure, refrigeration, and dairy infrastructure. A simple moral choice between natural and fake collapses under scale. The better questions are specific: which oils, which farming practices, what fat profile, what supply chain, how much processing, what use. Use matters because a spread for bread is not always ideal for pastry, frying, or commercial baking. Water content, melting behavior, and crystal structure affect performance. Margarine on a breakfast table and industrial shortening inside a laminated dough may belong to related fat technology without being interchangeable. Marketing often avoids that detail. A pastoral butter package shows a field. A margarine tub may show a sunflower or a heart. Both compress industrial systems into one reassuring image. The color yellow still performs trust. Now it hides not legal conflict, but the distance between raw material and spread. Butter survived. Margarine survived. The war changed both. Butter producers gained labeling protections and a powerful authenticity story. Margarine manufacturers gained legal acceptance, reformulated products, and a permanent place in the supermarket. Consumers gained choice, though not always clarity. The categories also borrowed from each other. Butter can be standardized, cultured, flavored, whipped, blended, and packaged. Margarine can emphasize simple ingredients, plant origins, and culinary performance. Products combine butter with vegetable oil. Language shifts between margarine, spread, plant butter, and baking stick. Modern labeling law still decides which names are permitted. Standards of identity define composition, while marketers search for words that communicate function without triggering legal challenge. The 19th century question, when does resemblance become deception? Now sits in supermarket debates over dairy and meat alternatives. Victory depends on the question. If the question is whether margarine destroyed butter, it failed. If the question is whether dairy interests could permanently keep yellow margarine out of American kitchens, they failed. If the question is whether consumers escaped manipulation, no side can claim victory. Lobbying, advertising, health claims, nostalgia, and price continue to shape the choice. The most durable result is legal and cultural. Margarine forced governments to decide when similarity becomes deception, when labeling is enough, and when regulation becomes protectionism. That argument now appears wherever a new food imitates an old one. Plant-based milk, cultured meat, egg substitutes, and products called cheese without dairy. The oleomargarine war never really ended. It changed ingredients. Margarine began as a technical answer to a social question: can chemistry make an affordable fat behave like butter? M.G. Morris found one answer in beef fat and milk. Dutch manufacturers industrialized it. American dairy groups fought its color. Congress taxed it. Courts judged it. Families kneaded yellow into white blocks. Wars made it useful. Vegetable oils remade it. Trans fat science forced it to change again. Calling it fake butter captures the insult but misses the history. Margarine was real enough to frighten an industry, useful enough to survive hostile laws, and flexible enough to outlive several versions of itself. Spread it on bread today, and the knife leaves a yellow line. That color once carried a tax 40 times larger than the pale version beside it. The food war was never only about taste. It was about who could imitate nature, who could define honesty, and who had the political power to make one shade of yellow legal. In the margarine war, what mattered most? Price, health claims, or the color laws? Choose one and explain why in the comments.